Hi again, hockey fans. Welcome into episode number 4 of Nothing But Hockey. Ben Holden, Paul Cappy and I, Big Ten analyst and former Buckeye. And joined now, I got to call this guy what he is, Cappy, Brad Schlossman of the Grand Forks Herald, the guru of college hockey. Schloss, good to see you. It's been a couple years. How are you, man?
Yeah, good to chat with you guys.
We appreciate your time. I think the last time that you and I saw each other in person was in 2022 in Albany, New York, of all places, in that regional. Am I right? I don't think I've seen you
Yeah,
since.
I don't think so. I think that sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll
And
say
you and Cappy, I can't believe that you two have never really you haven't crossed paths a whole lot over the years, right?
not in person.
Not in person. I thought last year was going to be a guarantee that North Dakota would end up in Sioux Falls,
Yeah.
but obviously
So did everybody
things
else.
change fast.
Hmm.
So it was going to happen, but no, it didn't happen. Things changed, moved around. You guys ended up in the what do you call a junior rink, maybe in
Yeah,
Centene.
it was the
But yeah, I know it's good to talk to you finally, at least face to face. So
Yeah.
yeah,
let's get this rolling.
Yeah, man.
absolutely.
Well, Schloss, let's kind of start. I want to start with you in this vein. Give us your one or two or even three big storylines, college hockey wise, going into the season as we're ready to begin games this week. What's front and center for you in that regard? Biggest storylines going into the season?
Well, I think number one is Boston College and some of the Hobie Baker guys. The best race for Hobie Baker might be between two Boston College guys. Last year we kind of went into that thinking Hudson and Celebrini could be competing against each other, and sure enough, it ended up being Celebrini. This year, I think we're going to have a little bit of that with Leonard and James Hagens, the freshman. It's been a freshman 3 years in a row that's won Hobie. It's been one of those super freshmen who we all knew was going to come in and be a highly touted guy, and they've lived up to it. And I think James Hagens is that guy.
Wow.
So I think BC with all the loaded players that they have, that's going to be one of the big storylines. Number two, from the Big Ten perspective, can the Big Ten finally close out a national tournament and get a championship? The last few years, when you look at the non-conference records, the Big Ten has improved that record from where it was before. The last 3 years, I believe it is, the Big Ten has had the best non-conference record. The NCHC had it before then. They haven't been able to translate that to a national title. They've been very close to doing so,
Yep.
but have not been able to finish it off. I think Big Ten fans are kind of waiting for when's going to be the year that someone finishes it off. And could this be this year? There's two really good teams atop the Big Ten right now that I'm looking at, which is Minnesota and Michigan State, with a lot of guys back on their team. Impact transfers for both teams brought in a first round pick out of the portal. And so those are two teams that I think are going to be looked at as potential contenders there. Um, and from the NCHC's perspective, I think it's what is the biggest storyline entering the NCHC this year? Denver's coming back, trying to win back-to-back titles
Yeah.
with Zeke William running the show. And maybe that's a little bit of an underrated part of the college hockey storylines. We talk a lot about the guys who leave early, and I think every year we kind of forget to talk about all the guys that decided to come back. And Zeev Bouillon's a guy who had a huge year and decides to come back. Leonard comes back. Perot comes back. It's Jimmy Snuggerud in the Big Ten comes back. There are a lot of guys, CC has Noah Laba. Gleb Vremyev has been one of the best or highest coveted free agents. He comes back. So as much as we talk about guys leaving and they do go on, a lot of important players came back and could be the difference between winning national titles.
Good stuff. Cappy?
Yeah, I just kind of to piggyback on that first story with BC. I actually think, and this a new breaking news. I am now a Hobie Baker voter. This will be my
Look at
first
you.
year on the panel. Colby Cohen served his 3 years, and he gave his vote down to me. So I'm excited to be in that. And I think Gabe Perot is going to be a sneaky guy there because he is just a point producer.
Yes.
Like he is flashy, but he's not the Ryan Leonard speed flash. And Higgins is going to bring in that. He's very deceptive in what he does. But you look at the score sheet, and he's going to have a goal and 2 assists. So and points are a big thing. As much as we try to see as much hockey as we can, we're not going to see every game in every place. You're going to sometimes look up like, oh, Gabe Pro had 5-point weekend. Maybe he wasn't the best player on the ice, but he produced the point. So I think it's going to be interesting if it comes down to voting, and sometimes teams cancel each other's players out a little bit. So that'll be interesting. It didn't hurt Celebrini last year, but I just thought he was so dynamic. But that's going to be an interesting one at BC. And another thing, going to be able to see them in, not in person, but covering a game with Michigan State and BC a week from Friday. Going to have that one on Friday on Big Ten Network. So that's going to be exciting to see how those teams stack up so early. It's BC's first game of the year. Michigan State's playing this weekend at Lake State, so we'll see if there's an advantage there. But it's going to be really fun to get a top 5 matchup out of conference right off the bat.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't rolled out my NCAA rankings quite yet, but tentatively I've got that as a 1-3 matchup right there. So some top teams playing right away should be fun. A lot of good non-conference matchups this year. It's kind of fun to see.
Do you believe in now? So I think Denver is going to be right there. Are you a believer in keeping the national champion at number 1 when you start out your new slate the next year? Or
Absolutely
you just start
not.
as it's completely crazy?
I do my own polls. I remember, UMass, after UMass won it, I had UMass at like 13 or so, and fans freaked out because they were number 1 in the polls. But I'm not looking at what you had last year. I am looking at what you have coming back. And UMass lost so many guys off that team. I'm like, how in the world do you think this team's going to be number 1 right now? Like, that's I'm looking at this year. So I see what teams have coming back. I see what they bring in. I look at the transfers that are coming in, and a lot of them I'll go type up potential line charts, and I'll look at the line charts and I'll say, this is what this team looks like. This is where I think they fit in. So I do look at where they finished in their league standings last year over a kind of a long sample size, but I don't. If you finished number 1 in the country last year and won the national title, but lost your entire team, I'm looking at this year. So, and that's one reason I have those teams high. Michigan State's got all those guys back, and I think all of us love Trey Augustine in goal. I mean, that's pretty good backbone there. And in BC, I think I saw what their top line did and single-handedly winning games, and it's maybe a little premature to assume that with Hagens he can slide in there and have that same chemistry, because Smith played with those guys at the NTDP for 2 years. Like, they had years of playing together when they showed up at BC, and Hagens has not played with these guys. So it'll be a little different. We'll see how quickly but I like the talent there, like the goaltenders for both teams. I just don't think there's a lot of questions for those teams.
Who do you think? And I want to go back to what you said at number 2, and I'm sure Cappy was kind of laughing inside, because a couple shows ago, and I know the folks in your territory won't like this, but I said I feel this is finally the year the Big Ten gets a national championship. And I, not to be a homer, because I do games in that conference. I know teams in the conference you cover exclusively just as good as the Big Ten teams. But aside from state, what other teams in Minnesota you mentioned? Is Wisconsin a team you worry about, or even a Michigan, because of what they always seem to bring? In the Michigan question mark, I think for years has been they haven't gotten the goaltending when they needed the goaltending at the right time. What's your take on all that, Schloss?
All of it. I think you're spot on everything you said. I mean, the Big Ten's going to win a national title at some point.
Yep.
It's teams that are well-resourced, well-financed. They have the arena, like everything's there,
yep.
Right? It's going to happen. Sports are cyclical. Like it's just win. And they have contenders this year. I think Wisconsin's going to be one of the more fascinating storylines in college hockey, because the Big Ten has kind of become a league where they've gotten a lot of these young NHL first round pick guys, really talented in there. And if you remember Mike Hastings at Minnesota State, he had his way against the Big Ten teams when he had some of
Did.
those older Minnesota State teams.
Yeah.
And, Wisconsin lost some really impactful players in the transfer portal, but he went out and got some of these older CCHA guys,
Yep.
and it feels like he's putting together this recipe. I know some people were critical, like, oh, what's he doing? I'm like, well, did you not see what he did against Big Ten teams when he was
Yeah.
at Minnesota State? Let's see how this plays out. If it works, maybe other Big Ten teams are going to say, hey, we need to find some older guys to mix in here. We can't do all these young guys. And if it doesn't work, maybe I think it's just this really interesting experiment.
Well, real quick, Cappy, I want to follow that up because we had Hastings on in our last show. And Cappy and I kind of jokingly said, but I think there's some validity to it based on what you're saying. Cappy played for him in Omaha, and he told me that most of that team, they were older guys. So I agree with that, Schloss. And I think other teams around the country, even a Michigan, they're going into the portal. Michigan never thought about going into the portal. So, but I'll let Cappy go ahead, and I know he's got something to follow that up with, though.
Yeah, I mean, getting back to what you said, how they're the resources that the Big Ten has, and even the NCHC, there's the arenas, all that.
Yeah.
You're starting to see the gap really expand between the top three conferences and the bottom three with the portal, with the NIL, all that stuff. What's your sense in terms of talking to people around the country? Is there a worry about that? Because there already was a little gap, but now it's expanding and it's getting bigger.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And part, you look at Bemidji State wins the CCHA. Eric Polkamp's one of the best players, and poof, he's gone. He's off to Denver. RIT had this wonderful team, makes the tournament, and then all of a sudden, Scarfoni's going to Wisconsin. Laskowski's going to Wisconsin. Wilkie's at North Dakota. Some of those guys, some of them are graduated and moved on. And so you're seeing some of these teams in the CCHA and Atlantic where guys usually you stick around for 4 years, and as you get a team with a lot of upperclassmen, now all of a sudden it's your turn to go make a splash in the NCAA tournament, win your conference, go in there and upset someone with these seniors. But now by the time some of these guys get to their senior year, these other programs spot them and they take them. And the trickle down effect, it hurts these schools. You see it in some of their non-conference records. The CCHA struggled last year in non-conference. But I think that is why you're seeing these schools and conferences be in favor of opening the CHL. Now, what that does is it massively expands the player pool.
Mm-hmm.
And the larger the player pool, the more parity there's going to be. And that's kind of what we see on the women's hockey side. When the player pool as the sport was starting, and it's very small, and it's not as many. You get a few of the top players, you're going to dominate. But as women's hockey grows and grows and grows, there's going to be more parity because there's just more players, and the difference between number 20 and number 40 best player is not much. And that's why I think,
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I also think that's why I think the NCAA is going to need about 10 to 20 new teams. And I know that's not going to happen, it might. It's amazing how you get some of these smaller schools and all of a sudden pop up and have Division I hockey, yet you can't find a way for some of these Big Ten schools Iowa has a pre-ready-made arena, which is by far the biggest obstacle. Nebraska also has an arena that would pack. But with that, all these players and then the rosters capped at 26, there are going to be a lot of good hockey players out there. And then there are going to be a lot of good hockey players left out of Division I hockey that were easily Division I hockey players this year and the past 5 years.
Yeah, D3 hockey is going to be loaded. if that happens or when it happens. I think it will happen. It's just I don't know when. It, yeah. I think the explosion of the player pool, what it does is I think the traditional powerhouse schools, I think they get 15% better when that opens up. And I think the CCHA type schools get 25% better.
Yeah.
So I think the top schools are going to get better, but the other schools, the net is going to be bigger, and that's where you're going to see um, the differences between those programs narrow if that happens. And then we're going to get into the dilemma of all these. So I'm of the opinion all of the CHL guys are going to come play college. I think there are going to be very few who don't. I think once they graduate at 18 and you have a first round pick, let's say 15 overall pick, already played 3 years in Brandon, at college, he's ready for the next thing. And
Yeah.
the college is going to say, hey, you don't have to live with your billet parents anymore. You can come live in the dorms with all these college guys and, live the experience, have your meals cooked at the arena, fly a charter plane. He's gone. He's not going back to Brandon.
No.
So,
Well, there's that hole. There's that hole, right, in the competitive.
yeah,
An 18-year-old
exactly.
is either got to play in the NHL or the
Exactly.
OHL. At least you
Yep.
go to college, and that's a way better level. No offense. I mean, you're playing against grown men.
Yeah.
They'll have that opportunity. Chicago had a guy last year, Kevin Korchinski. He had to play in the NHL or the WHL. They chose to play him in the NHL all year. This year, now that he's 19, he's starting the year in Rockford in the AHL.
Yeah.
So he would have been a prime example of a guy. And you're right. And I think those are the NCHC, the Denver, North Dakota, Michigan. I mean, people will be going to Michigan. They see that track record of guys playing college and then go to the NHL and success. With the CHL, what do you see as a timeline? Obviously, now you have that court case with the player trying to go to Arizona State. What is a timeline with that? And if that is won, does it just completely open things up right away?
Yeah. So the Arizona State kid's kind of separate. There's the other kid is the case, and that's really what to watch. And it's really hard to know the timeline because is it going to play all the way out? I think back to some of the other changes that happened, like the NIL thing that played out in the courts. Now the two-time transfer thing that went to the courts. It was mid-December, and a judge issued basically an injunction and said, we're going to decide this in the summer, but for the meantime, all the two-time transfers are eligible. So I'm here in North Dakota. There was a basketball player who was a two-time transfer who was sitting out, and then all of a sudden, game 4, oh, I can play tonight. And he was in. The second that ruling came down, he was in. So
benefits North Dakota in goal this year.
Yeah, I mean it's
TJ.
Yeah, for sure. They in the hockey team they're able to bring in a two-time transfer, and that's the question. Like, does it play out in the courts? Does the NCAA go and say, "Hey, we're tired of losing court cases. Figure this out, settle with them, open it up"? Does a judge come through and say, we're gonna decide this case down the road, but until we decide this, they're all eligible. Who knows what the courts are gonna do? But I'm like, who knows when it's gonna happen? I mean, it could happen. It could happen by next year. It could happen in 2 years. It's just hard to know. Maybe it doesn't happen at all. That would surprise me if it doesn't happen at all. It would really, really surprise me. I just don't see what the argument is for keeping these kids ineligible that will make sense to a judge.
Well,
I mean, the dollars and cents of it, right?
Yeah.
NCAA players are making more money than these kids in the OHL. They get $100 or $200 a week.
They're like the USHL kids. Like there's very little difference. There's some guys on pro contracts playing in the league against them, but hey, there's
your signing bonus.
There's kids who were eligible in college who played with guys who were on contract in Europe. Why is that kid eligible who played against these people in Europe? I think it's just a tough argument for the NCAA to maintain the status quo. And I don't know if they're going to fight it or not, or how hard or how long.
I personally think it's all out of control because what's happening in football and basketball. I don't think there's any stopping it. But another area that I know you're a fan of, I think all three of us are in agreement, is the regional deal going back on campus, not happening. Why did that ultimately not happen, Schloss, in your mind?
Yeah, I just don't think there was enough support for it yet. I think I first started writing columns on this about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, maybe.
Oh, that long ago.
Yeah, I think it was about
Wow.
2012.
Okay.
2013, maybe.
Okay.
And I will say there is significantly more support now than there was back then.
Okay.
So the tide is starting to shift, but it's not there yet. And I think there's kind of a regional divide in this. People in New England, they're fine with the current setup. There's going to be 2 regionals there like every year. They can drive and watch tons of college hockey games.
Yeah.
They usually get decent crowds. It's not a home crowd. It's not terrible. And then us out west, we kind of see the problem.
Yep.
It's a challenge just, getting good regionals that can be filled. And when you can, let's be honest, it's not really a neutral site. I mean, no one's going to argue that North Dakota playing in Fargo is neutral. Like, what are we doing here?
Right.
And then there's just so many issues with that too. I think after a long season, teams should be rewarded for having a great season.
100%.
We were very close 2 years ago to having Quinnipiac, after that amazing season, get sent to Fargo to play a 4-seeded North Dakota. And what would happen if Quinnipiac got sent out there and lost in front of that hostile crowd?
Yep.
They would be complaining hard, and they would have a great complaint.
They would.
They absolutely.
Yeah.
And now we have, these situations where, Minnesota hasn't hosted a regional in a decade.
It's amazing.
And that's like that state produces more college hockey players than any other state. Yeah. Michigan is basically doesn't host regionals anymore.
Nope.
Grand Rapids maybe once or twice.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while now.
Not a long time. I think the last time might have been 2013 when North Dakota was there.
Yeah, and there were 2,000 people at the game. It was the biggest game they played in all year, and it was the smallest crowd they played in front of the entire year. And we were in Albany. We saw what Albany was. I was counting the number of fans at Minnesota State Harvard game.
Yep.
I could count. The week before, they played a CCHA title game in Mankato, and that place had people hanging from the rafters. It was unbelievable. Like we can have this in college hockey. We can have these amazing environments, and NHL fans, they see what the environment's like in the playoffs. They could do that in college.
The last time I remember, and you were there because we've both been at this for 20 plus years. How many years for you now?
21,
22?
21 maybe?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. So 04. But was the regional in Madison, and Cappy and I talked about this earlier today. And that changed. Teams under 500 couldn't get in.
Yeah.
And I've thought long and hard, Schloss, and you've been in a ton of buildings. Cappy has too, when he played all that stuff. But in 21 years of television doing regionals, 13 years in regionals, that Madison regional was without question the best environment I've ever called a game in college hockey. I thought the roof was going to come off. I think it's a must that we get this stuff back on campus, because you look at college basketball, even the women's tournament, those buildings are packed. That's what's
great.
To your point, they play all year. They shouldn't be playing in front of 600 fans on a Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, and it's the showcase for college hockey. Right. It's on national TV. It's on national TV in Canada now.
Yep.
You might be competing with these major junior teams for players. Hint, hint.
Yeah, exactly.
And guess what? When they flip on and see a national tournament game, and it's like college baseball for me.
Yep.
If I flip on a college baseball game in whatever month and there's nobody at the game, I'm sorry, I'm flipping.
Right.
It's just okay. There's nobody there. I can't do it.
Right.
When you flip and all of a sudden you see a packed stadium and a crowd going crazy, no matter what sport it is, you're like, oh, what is this?
That's right.
This looks awesome.
Yeah.
And I think the college hockey could do that and bring in more fans.
Agree with you.
And we've all been to how many arenas? All the arenas can bring it. Like
Yep.
if there's a good team, like you have these great environments at small rinks, big rinks, you know.
Well, let's keep pushing, man. and
It's
hope it happens.
interesting. It's interesting though. You say the divide is maybe regional. I think a little bit from people I've talked to is maybe the age and experience of coaches, because I've talked to a couple Big Ten coaches, I have a couple NCHC coaches, some younger guys. We all know David Carl's one of those guys,
Mm-hmm.
and the young guys want it.
Mm-hmm.
The older coaches I spoke to kind of scoffed at it. So it's a little harder, I think, than it's just regional. I think there's if you're not getting all the full support from all your coaches from the West,
Yeah.
I just see it a lot harder than I hoped it and you hoped it would be.
Yeah. And I think some of the older coaches, I don't want to totally put words in their mouths, but there used to be home site regionals. And they didn't really like it. But one of the difference is back in the day, they weren't earned home site regionals. Like they were kind of predetermined there.
Ann Arbor did it twice, and it was kind of the reason.
Correct.
For sure. During my days, they hosted twice, being 4 seeds, beat the number 1 seeds twice in a row because they're playing in that crazy barn in the early 2000s.
And that's I completely understand why they didn't like it. But the system I want would be rewarding the top 8 seeds and having them play at home the first weekend and then go to a super regional where the top 4 remaining play at home again. And then you can go to the Frozen Four, which will be packed. Perfect. And that way you were ensure there's a home team for the first 2 rounds.
Yeah. Is there any way, and I just kind of thought of this one, to be honest, to maybe get a little more support from those other conferences, that you would take the top 6, the top 6 seeds would be the conference champions.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other 2 would go to the next 2 highest. And I'm just trying to think of ways to get more teams. So they're earning it by winning your conference tournament and getting in. And then I think you go by seeding after. So the second round, you go to the higher seed. I'm trying to help find a way here. And I literally just thought as one, it might not be 100% fair, but it gets more maybe people talk, bringing them to the table in the ECAC if they know they're going to have a home game, or if, or if you're at RIT is hosting one, which they have a nice little barn actually at RIT. I know that's an issue too, going to those smaller rinks and some of the other schools, but I want it the way, I love the way you propose it, and David's been talking about it. I'm just trying to, there might have to be some tweaks to get more people on board, I think.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, hopefully either the change happens or the current system somehow magically gets better, which I don't see happening because it's been 12 years. That's my argument is like, there's these arguments that, hey, the system, we just need to tweak the system. I'm like, you've had 12 years of tweaking. The problem isn't making small tweaks. Some of them were good that they've done. They have made some good adjustments, but anytime you have Harvard and Minnesota State playing in Albany, there's no way to fix that.
Nope.
I can tell you, and there's, if you have Western Michigan playing Denver in Manchester, I'm sorry, you can't, there's just nothing you can do. And under our current system, every year we're holding our breath. are we gonna have one of those? And some years we do, some years we don't, but every single year we're holding our breath that we're not going to have a regional where Ben and I are hanging out with 10 other people watching a big time college hockey game that deserved a much better
Yep.
atmosphere. It's a great game, by the way.
It really was, man. It really was. I want to go back to Denver because they're the reigning champs. And you mentioned Pole Camp coming in, and you obviously get to cover David Carr a lot, man. What have you learned, Schloss, and what makes this guy tick and what makes him the damn good coach he is and continues to win the big prize in college hockey? What is it, man?
Well, I think it's a combination of he's a smart guy and sees things really well, big and small picture both. And he's got some assistants that are very, very good recruiters.
Yeah.
Tavis McMillan's always on the road. He'll miss home games all the time. He's grinding out there. And when you kind of watch the recruiting classes come in, that is where it starts. Like they've stacked together a bunch of classes without a bunch of misses in their recruiting. And that's hard to do. So I think it's a combination of he's a good coach and he has some assistants that are really good recruiters along with him that have helped bring up good players. And obviously, come NCAA tournament time is when they've been really effective the last few years.
Well, somewhat part two here of our fourth episode of Nothing But Hockey. We're in different spots. Brad Schlossman, upper left. He's got the lid on now. Paul Cappy and I, Ben Holden with you. And Cappy, we were talking Denver there. Let's kind of carry that on a little bit. I know you got a question here you want to hit Schloss with.
Yeah, I mean, it's about Denver, just the success they've had, but even in North Dakota and all that with recruiting now, with NIL and the money now, and now the universities, that's going to be coming. That's another court judgment coming through. Mm-hmm. What have you heard from coaches and whatnot through agents when they're recruiting? Is money brought up in every, especially for the higher end guys, is money brought up in every conversation and every recruiting process now?
It's brought up in some, but not every. The NCHC schools, NIL's not like this big prolific thing. They have ways of getting NIL money, but it's probably not as much money. These guys aren't making the money that everyone thinks they are, I would say. Are there some college hockey players that are? Yeah, but it's probably not as widespread in college hockey as everyone thinks it is. And I still think a lot of North Dakota has a collective now. I think there are a lot of these other opportunities for NIL money. I just was at the arena on Tuesday. They did a scrimmage, opened it up to the public for the first time ever because of NIL rules. They are selling jerseys in the team store with players' names on the back.
Yeah.
And they can get a cut of that.
Wow.
So there's different, and the fans are just absolutely love it. Like, this is a great thing for the fans. The players like it. It's just seems like it's so dumb we didn't do this years ago, right? But yeah, I mean, I just don't think like the whole, like what you're seeing in basketball and in football, where they're saying, hey, 250 grand if you come here. That has not made its way into hockey yet, as much as you would think. Are there some players that are getting some offers and stuff like that? Yeah, but I just don't think it's as prevalent as everyone thinks it is. And
I guess, but is it a conversation now when you are?
Yes.
I mean, because now advisors can literally be in the recruiting process. It is not parents. I mean, I think parents are, but it's changing to where now your agent is involved in that recruiting process.
I think it is coming up more from the player side at this point right now, where they'll say, hey, what can you get me? And, some schools will say what they can. So I do think that's happening. I just don't think it's quite what we're seeing in basketball and football yet. In fact,
Sure.
like a lot of the area that this is first being broken into is with current players. Hey, if you come back one more year, got something for you here.
Yeah.
I think that's where we're starting to see it enter college hockey more so than in the recruiting process. That being said, I'm sure it is happening in the recruiting process. I'm sometimes I'm told things and I don't know if I fully believe them. You know, hey, we're not
Right.
we're not doing any NIL. We
Yeah.
haven't told anyone NIL. Like, yeah, but these three
That-
people said you are. And so sometimes and they're like, no, those people are crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. So who knows what to
I
believe?
don't
But
know why would you want to lie about that? I
yeah,
like
true.
it's
Yeah,
part of it
exactly.
now. It's
Yeah,
if you're not using it, if you're able
yeah.
to and you're not
Mhm.
making it aware, it's like they're
Mhm.
trying to, squirrel away the nuts and not spend
Yeah,
it. But if you can, why would I mean, we're in a new world now.
yeah.
It's just and it's not changing back anytime. The innocence of college sports is completely gone. Um I just, when you talk about North Dakota, is this the first kind of, do they have, I mean, because they're the alumni bases, it goes up with football in most schools. Is that being used at all at North Dakota in terms of getting, Jackson Blakes and those types of players? Is that something that is being used or talked about maybe potentially in the future?
Yeah, to my knowledge, not they haven't used that in recruiting yet, unless I mean, certainly things can escape my knowledge. I have not heard that.
Okay.
One of the different like North Dakota hockey is the main sport at North Dakota, which helps the hockey program here. Um, the enrollment at North Dakota is right now it's at like 15,000 just over, which is record number. In the past years, 14 or 13. And in some of these other, a Big Ten school, I mean, they might have 50,000 enrollment. So when you
Yeah.
just look at pure number of alums, like some of these schools just dwarf what even the North Dakota is in number of alums. And when you have that many alums, how many of them are, making lots of money and donating back? Of course, at these other schools, that's primarily
Right.
going to football,
Yep.
and maybe basketball. But to my knowledge, they're not going out and recruiting kids with NIL money necessarily. What they can do is say, we do have a collective. When you get on campus, um, there's that. We have these opportunities with name, image, and likeness for, like I said, with the jersey type things and selling your merchandise and all these. So I think they'll inform of what the opportunities are. If they have said, hey, 50,000 if you come here, hey, 100,000, that I have never heard anyone say that. Um, Anywhere in the NCHC for that matter. I've not heard anyone tell me NCHC teams are offering
Hmm.
money. Um, it'll be interesting with Arizona State coming in because that is a Power Four athletic department with
Yep.
more resources than some of the NCHC schools, which are uniquely not Power Four schools, but they are ones
Right.
where almost every campus, hockey is the biggest sport on campus.
Right.
So kind of this
Right.
interesting contrast.
Somewhere Chris Webber is smiling. I'm sure you guys remember the interview, right? When he saw his jersey hanging in 91, 92, when he was there with the Fab Five. And now I saw that the other day, Schloss. I was like in the Sioux shop
Mhm.
selling the jerseys, man. That's awesome. I want to get to North Dakota because nobody will have a better feel of their team than you. But I want to ask you one more question about a team in Colorado, and that's Chris Mayotte. I ran into him in Colorado College. I ran into him. I was flying to Minneapolis to begin my journey basically to Canada when I went up to Bemidji last year to do the CCHA tournament. We were on the same flight. He's on the plane watching tape and unbelievable job. Kind of the same question about David Carl, but Chris Mayotte. What's making this guy tick and what's allowed him to get that program that was really down for a long
Mhm.
time back to relevance?
And I'm going to give you the exact same answer. He's a very, very smart guy,
Okay.
intelligent guy. He sees big and small things. and he has a good recruiter on his staff. Peter Menino's out
Yep.
there trying to find players. So I think it's a combination of, and also both David Carl and Chris Mayotte are very good recruiters themselves.
Yep.
They also can see and project players. It's not just their recruiting guys, but Peter Menino and Tavis McMillan both are very important pieces to the recruiting puzzle. And that's what's been the biggest difference is, David or Chris Mayotte came aboard. The first couple years, the wins didn't come.
Yep.
But if you followed the USHL in recruiting and you saw the guys they were getting, it was, oh man, like they got all these guys. Like this is going to pop here once this group gets on campus, and you just had to wait for them to get on campus and to become, I actually was wondering if they were going to be a year too young last year. I was like, their best forwards are all these freshmen and sophomores. They might be too young. It's going to be one more year until CC arrives. Well, they arrived a year ahead of schedule on my book. And it was because they recruited really well. They got these really good players. They were winning recruiting battles for these prominent junior hockey players. They were able to pick up the right guys who weren't like necessarily first round draft picks, but Varamiev went undrafted and he's going to be a free agent guy. Brett Link is going to be a free agent guy someday, I think. Laba, they got late. He's a difference maker. Wisdom, that's a loaded lineup of guys that they just did a great job recruiting, and then they've nailed their goalie recruits. Caden Mberico was one of their early recruits that they got, and he's been phenomenal. So, yeah, they've definitely built things the right way from the bottom up.
All right, I'm going to follow that up, Cappy, with what's going on with the Sioux up there. Yes, I still call them the Sioux. I always will and always have. What's the feel? What's the feel of what they have this year with North Dakota's team, Schloss?
Yeah, I think a lot of depth up front. When you start looking at the roster, they've got some players who can be difference makers, like a Cameron Berg and the Jaden Perron. Owen McLaughlin had a good year last year, and bringing aboard Sasha Boisvert was a first-round pick of the Chicago Blackhawks. Max Swanson was the MVP in the USHL. You kind of mix in some guys like that, and Dylan James is getting a little bit older now. Jackson Kuntz broke out a little bit, and you start looking at who might be on that fourth line, and there's a ton of depth there, and that's where they should win games with their depth up front. They're young on the back end. They have 7 underclassmen and 1 upperclassman.
Wow.
And sometimes that can be a recipe for adventurous nights. And maybe they'll have some early in the season because their schedule's tough.
I saw that.
Providence, Minnesota State, EU, Cornell. Like, those are really good teams. I think Cornell's going to be awesome, by the way, this year. They return almost everyone. So,
yeah.
So they might have some up and down, but I like the talent that's there. So, they've got a mix of bigger guys who are tough to play against. They've got a couple offensive guys. And then in goal, TJ Semptenfelter comes over from Arizona State, and he's been good. So,
is it his net? Is it his net?
I think he enters the season as the number 1. I think Hobie Hedquist he's going to be a sophomore now, and he was the number 2 last year. I think they want to get Hobie Hedquist more starts this year. I think that's so while I do think TJ Semptenfelter begins the season as the 1, I think they will intentionally get Hobie Hedquist more action this season. You need to get him experience. You need to know what you got. And B, when he came in last year, he earned it. He played well enough to where the coaches are going to feel comfortable rolling him out there. So I think we'll see we won't see quite the goalie splits we saw last year with Ludwig Persson starting so many games.
Yeah.
Do you see Carter Wilkie? I had watched him play. Had him in the regional with RIT. Big guy, smart, lanky player. Does he slot right in maybe as top line guy?
I think he starts the season as the second line center. I think Cameron Berg coming back is kind of a do-it-all guy, as a lock as the first line center. But I think one thing they wanted to address in the offseason was get a little more center depth, get some more options at center. And yeah, you saw Carter Wilkie up front and what he can do, and I'm sure you saw some video of him of the regular season, what he did, and you described him pretty well from what I've seen so far, that he's a bigger centerman that's pretty smart, knows the game,
Yes.
and that can help him. I don't know if he's a guy that's going to go and dangle guys all night long or anything like that, but he's just a good, smart 200-foot guy, and those are the types of players North Dakota loves to have.
Yeah. Well, Schloss, as we kind of close things up here, you said in the beginning you do your own poll. When does that come out?
Once I start typing it and finishing it out, I kind of try to do little descriptions of why I have each team there. So
Okay.
hopefully within the next 7 days, North Dakota's regular season opener is is it the 13th? I'm trying to think of what
11th or 12th, maybe?
12th. Yes, it's the 12th.
Yeah.
A lot of college hockey will be on the 11th. It'll definitely be out before then. So
All right.
early, maybe Tuesday the 8th will be my goal to put that out there. Try to have reasoning for
Got
why.
some real games this weekend, so hopefully those
There
teams
are.
do well.
There are, but I'm not going to switch it. I'm not going to panic over one game. These are my picks, and I didn't get the national champion right last year.
You read my mind. That's where I was going next.
The 2 years before I got it, though.
Cappy, I told you, man.
I picked Denver, and they were coming off a sub-500 season. So that's where I always go with what they did last year.
Right.
And then I picked Quinnipiac.
I know.
Before that year. But while I picked BU last year, they did not win it. But I did have, of my top 5 teams, 4 of them were in the Frozen Four. So I had a decent run last year.
Yeah.
The pressure's on to do it again, because if I screw it up, then we'll just drop this whole thing about talking how I did last year. But we'll see. I really like what BC's got. You question, do they have depth? I think they have decent depth, not as much as some other teams. But that first, you get in the NCAA tournament, you got those long TV timeouts.
Yeah. Changes the game, man. The Big Ten, we're doing games in under 2 hours, man.
I know. You guys are rolling
it's
through
cooking, baby.
Those 12-minute intermissions are like bathroom and right back.
You better know where the bathroom is and get in there and get out and back in the booth, man. There's no messing around.
That was a shock the first time I went there.
Excuse me. I like it personally. The television producers love the 3 timeouts because obviously they can produce and more gets into the show. But as a broadcaster, and Gabby can probably agree with me, you get into flow, man. You're going. I love it. So
I do like it for the regionals because it's a bigger stage.
Yeah.
For the regular season, it is beautiful.
One time.
I also think the Big Ten, not to get on a Big Ten thing, but it used to be 18 minutes. You go to 12. I think now they could nestle right in there at 15.
Yeah.
Or even 14 would make a difference because they did it during COVID. And the games, the rules changed. The games were going longer because you had 2 overtimes possibly in the shootout.
Yeah.
So games were going 2.5 hours. Games now are going 2 hours and 5 minutes. If you added 6 minutes of intermission time, you're still staying way under 2:30. Yeah. And that's what a lot of the people at our network are concerned about, and they had some say in that. So if they stay at 12, it's fine. But I think 15 is kind of like the sweet spot. But I love the fact. No. I love the fact, though, in the regionals that you get to talk to the coaches, and that enables us to do that coming out of breaks. Because I think the more we can get insight in the game, we're not going to get players, obviously, but it's good to grow the game and get fans want to hear that stuff, I think. So I like the way they do it. But yes, regular season, no. Let's keep the games rolling along.
Yeah. Well, Schloss, we really appreciate you doing
this. Did we
this,
ask
man.
for a top 5? Can we get a top 5 or a Frozen Four prediction? Or how do we?
I don't know. Will you give that out, or
I'm trying to remember my top 5. I think I had Minnesota 2. I think that team has a lot of depth.
Okay.
And I think their back end reminds me a little bit of 2 years ago.
Solid.
When it's really solid, and they're starting to get a little older now.
Older.
Yep. And then I had Michigan State 3. I think they've got some good depth. I know they lost Levshinov on the back end, but Nicholas Andrews is going to be a sneaky good addition to that blue line. I think I had Denver 4. The Pioneers, despite losing a lot of guys like Shai Buyam, Barons, Rizzo, Tristan Brose, I think they have enough back and guys who are playing on lower lines last year that are ready for bigger roles, and they're going to step in and be fine. And then I had North Dakota 5. I think they have, like I said, I love the depth up front for North Dakota. And after that, I can't remember. Those are,
Well, you got your top 5. That's
those
good.
are the 5, yeah. But it was definitely tough. Like some of the leagues, I did each league individually too, and that will be out very soon. That was miserable. Hockey East, I was like looking at the 8th place team and the 3rd place team, and I'm like, I feels like there's no difference here. Like
Right.
these teams are the same. Like in CHC, who do I pick 8th? Like right now, the 8th place team is in nationally ranked. It feels like such an insult to have this team 8th, but I have to put someone 8th, so that was tough. It just several of the leagues I felt like you're like splitting hairs at this point. Like I feel like there are certain areas of separation, but a lot of them I'm like, my predictions could come out looking terrible at the end of the year because these teams are so close.
I think you'll be fine. You're pretty good at that, man. There's no one better.
We'll see. We'll see.
Well, this has been awesome, Schloss. Thanks for doing this. We really appreciate your time, and I'm sure the fans are already lined up outside the Ralph ready for the exhibition game on Friday night. So good to catch up, my friend. Really appreciate your time. Keep up the great work. And how can people follow you on social media? And then we'll put a bow on this.
Yeah, Schlossman GF on Twitter and GrandForksHerald.com/UND Hockey. Easy to remember.
Boom. All right. For Brad Schlossman, Paul Cappy and I, Ben Holden saying thanks for watching episode number 4 of Nothing But Hockey. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time with an all-new edition of it.